I don't even know how to begin this. I feel like my brain has been ripped in half. I got married 12 days ago. A small, beautiful ceremony. Just family and a few close friends. We danced. We laughed. We made vows that were supposed to mean something. I took his last name. I cried signing the papers because I truly believed I had found my person. 2 days after the wedding, I got a call from a local police department. I thought it was a prank at first. The officer on the phone asked to confirm my identity. He repeated my full name, my new last name. I said yes, thinking maybe it was about a traffic ticket or some mix-up with the license change. But then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "We have reason to believe you may be a victim of marriage fraud. Someone else is legally married to a man with that same last name, and we believe it might be a family member of yours." I thought it was a joke, like some horrible, elaborate prank, but the officer wasn't laughing. He said there was an open investigation involving a man married under 2 separate identities. He asked if I could come in for a statement. I started shaking. I remember staring at the wall like I wasn't in my own body. I asked, "Who is the other woman? Do you have a name?" There was a pause on the line, and then he said it. My sister's name. My actual sister. I hung up the phone and vomited into the sink. I still don't know how long I was standing there after, just staring at nothing, hands gripping the edge of the counter, breathing like I'd run a marathon. I thought I knew heartbreak. I thought I understood betrayal, but nothing could have prepared me for that moment. And somehow, what came next was even worse. Looking back now, I want to scream at myself. I want to grab the version of me from 2 years ago and shake her, tell her to pay attention. But love makes you blind, and I was head over heels from the moment I met him. We met at this dumb little community fundraiser my best friend dragged me to. I almost didn't go. I was coming off a breakup, feeling gross and antisocial, and the last thing I wanted was to be around people. But she insisted, said I needed to get out and breathe. He was there helping with the silent auction table. I remember the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. Confident but not cocky. Funny without trying too hard, and kind. God, he was so kind. We started talking that night. Nothing flirty, just easy conversation. He told me he was originally from out of state, moved here for work, didn't have much family around. I didn't even press for details. Why would I? A lot of people move for work. He was attentive, warm, genuinely curious about me. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. By our 3rd date, I was already picturing what our life would look like. He wasn't flashy or showy, but he made me feel safe, grounded. He listened when I talked about my job stress. He brought me soup when I got sick. He remembered little things, like my favorite tea, or how I hated when people interrupted during movies. And my family, they loved him. My parents said he was the most respectful man I'd ever brought home. My dad even got misty-eyed once, whispering to me, "He seems like the one." Everyone loved him, except for my sister. At the time, I thought she was just being her usual standoffish self. She and I were never especially close growing up. She was always the one with secrets, the kind who'd smile during dinner, then cry alone in her room. But she showed up to the first dinner we had as a couple, barely said a word to him, didn't look him in the eye, left early, blaming a headache. I remember teasing her about it after. "Come on," I joked, "you don't like him?" She just gave a tight smile and said, "He's familiar." At the time, I assumed she meant his personality. Like, he reminded her of someone. I never imagined what she really meant. We moved in together after a year. He proposed a few months later, nothing dramatic, just us on the couch in sweatpants, takeout on the table. He looked nervous but happy. Told me I made him feel like he could finally breathe, that no one had ever loved him the way I did. I remember crying, just nodding through tears. I thought I was lucky. I thought I had found someone who would never hurt me. But even then, I can't ignore the way my sister looked at me when I told her we were engaged. Her face went pale. She didn't say congrats. She just stared, then asked when the wedding would be. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid attention, but I didn't, and now I can't unsee the signs I missed. For a while, everything felt perfect. Like annoyingly perfect. The kind of relationship people envy on Instagram, but don't believe actually exists. We cooked dinner together most nights, went on weekend hikes, fell asleep watching documentaries. He always kissed me on the forehead before bed. Always made coffee for me before I even got out of bed. I used to tell people he was my calm in the chaos, my soft place to land. He loved to ask questions about my dreams, my childhood, my favorite songs. I once told him about this dumb little kid's book I used to obsess over, and 2 weeks later, he tracked down a copy on eBay and surprised me with it. Thoughtful stuff. The kind that makes you think, wow, maybe this one's real. And he was charming with my parents, especially my dad. They bonded over home improvement projects and grilling. My mom used to whisper, "He's such a gentleman," like she couldn't believe I landed someone like him. I remember her saying once, "You're glowing around him." And I was. But my sister, God, it's so obvious now, she avoided being around us. Whenever we hosted family dinners, she'd cancel last minute. If she did show up, she'd barely speak to him. I remember one time we were playing board games after dinner. Me, my parents, him, and my mom asked my sister to join. She just looked at us, then said she had an early morning and left without saying goodbye. I asked him once, "Do you think she doesn't like you?" He shrugged. Maybe she just doesn't like seeing her sister happy. Some siblings are like that. I laughed at the time, thought he was being cheeky, but it planted a seed. I started pulling away from her. Nothing dramatic, but the distance between us grew, and he always knew the right thing to say. When work stressed me out, he told me he was proud of me. When I worried about our budget for the wedding, he said, "I'd marry you at a bus stop if I had to." I felt safe, secure. He wasn't flashy, but he made me feel like the most important person in his world. Except, he never talked much about his past. I chalked it up to him being a private person. He said his family was complicated and that he hadn't spoken to them in years. No siblings, parents divorced, no close cousins. I respected that. I didn't want to pry. But there was always a quiet undercurrent of avoidance when I brought up the idea of meeting anyone from his side. Maybe someday, he'd say, let's just focus on us. And I loved that idea, just us, against the world. At least, that's what I thought. When we started planning the wedding, he insisted on keeping it small. Intimate, he called it. Let's make it just about love, not politics. So we kept the guest list tight, mostly my side. Friends, immediate family. He told me he didn't want to invite anyone who hadn't been there for him. At the time, it sounded noble, romantic even. The day we got married, he cried. Real tears. Wiped them on his sleeve, kissed my hands like he couldn't believe I was real. I remember thinking, God, I hope everyone gets to feel loved like this at least once in their life. I had no idea what that man was hiding behind those tears. The first red flag didn't wave like a warning. It whispered, quiet, almost apologetic, the kind of thing you notice and then instantly talk yourself out of noticing. It started with his phone. He never made a big deal about privacy, but I realized he always tilted the screen away from me. Not dramatically, just slightly, like muscle memory, like he'd been doing it for years. One night we were curled up on the couch and I noticed a message pop up. The preview just said, "Can't sleep." You? No name, no picture, just that. I asked, "Who's that?" He clicked the phone off and said, "Wrong number." Happens all the time. I laughed, told him he should probably block them. He said, "It's fine." People get lonely. It stayed with me though. Something about the way his jaw tightened, the way he changed the subject right after. Another time, I found a necklace in one of his drawers. A delicate gold chain with a tiny charm. Definitely not mine. When I asked about it, he said, it was my mom's. I asked why he kept it in the back of a sock drawer. He told me he didn't like seeing it. Said it reminded him of how broken their relationship was. At the time, I felt awful for prying. I apologized. He kissed my forehead and told me he was lucky I cared so much. But it wasn't just the phone or the necklace. It was the way he'd sometimes go for late-night drives and come back smelling like a different soap. He'd claim he needed air. or that he went to clear his head. I believed him. Of course I did. Why wouldn't I? Then there was the weird moment at the post office. We went to mail out our wedding invitations together. He waited in the car while I ran in to grab more stamps. As I walked back out, I saw a woman staring into the car window at him. She looked stunned, like she'd seen a ghost. He rolled the window down, said something I couldn't hear, and the woman just turned and walked away fast. Didn't even look at me. I asked who she was and he laughed. Actually laughed. Some examples, crazy one. Don't worry about it. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything inside me should have screamed. But I smiled. I nodded. I let him reach across the console and squeeze my hand. I ignored the way his palm felt cold, how my own chest tightened without reason. And my sister, she stopped responding to my texts altogether. I sent her photos of the wedding dress I was thinking about. No reply. I invited her to come with me for the fitting. She said she had to work. I started to feel like she was punishing me. I even complained to our mom, who said, maybe she's just jealous. You know how she gets. That night, I told him how sad it made me, not having my sister involved. He rubbed my back and said, some people can't handle seeing others happy. That's not your fault. But something in his tone felt rehearsed, too polished, too smooth, like a man who'd given that speech before. I wish I could say I trusted my gut, that I followed the little tugs of discomfort every time something didn't feel right. But the truth is, I silenced them. I buried them under reason, hope, and love. Because I wanted to believe him. I told myself every couple has little secrets, that everyone's phone is private, and some people just don't like to talk about their past. I told myself the necklace was probably a painful reminder, that late-night drives were better than yelling matches. I spun his red flags into sympathy. I turned my doubts into character flaws, my flaws. When my sister stopped talking to me completely, I convinced myself it was because she was dramatic. She's always been like this, I said. She wants attention. She's never liked when things aren't about her. And when my fiancé, no, my husband, came home one night smelling like women's shampoo, I laughed and said, did you shower at the gym or something? He smiled. Stopped at my co-worker's house to fix her sink. I guess I picked up her hand soap or something. I remember nodding, smiling, telling myself you'd know if he was lying. But I didn't. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to. There were other little things. He got jumpy when I mentioned getting our marriage license paperwork handled early. Said we should wait until after the honeymoon. No rush, he said. Let's just enjoy the moment. He told me he wanted to keep our finances separate for a while, just in case, and called it responsible. I agreed, because I didn't want to be the clingy wife who demanded too much too fast. Every hesitation, every gap in his story, every carefully vague answer. I filled it in with trust. My friends noticed. One of them, Emily, pulled me aside at my bachelorette party. Hey, she said gently, don't take this the wrong way, but are you sure he's who he says he is? I mean, do you really know him? I laughed it off, told her she was just protective, that she didn't see what I saw, that he made me happy, because he did, until he didn't. He was the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't too much, that I wasn't hard to love, and I clung to that. I wrapped my whole identity around the idea that this man had chosen me, and I couldn't let anyone shake that. Not my sister, not my friends, not even myself. And so I kept excusing, kept dismissing, kept denying, even when I caught him once, standing outside on the phone at midnight whispering. When I asked who it was, he told me it was a coworker dealing with a crisis. I remember saying, at midnight, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You don't trust me?" That was it, just 4 words, and I felt guilty, like I was the one ruining things by being paranoid. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself to stop overthinking. I told myself, it's just wedding stress. You're tired, you're emotional. And I believed it. Until 2 days after the wedding. Until the police said my husband's last name was already on another marriage certificate. And that the other woman was my sister. The weirdest part was how fast it all changed. After the wedding, you'd think things would get better, that being officially married would solidify us, make things feel more real, more connected. That's what I expected, what I hoped. But it felt like the moment we got back from the mini honeymoon, Something shifted in him, subtly at first, like a tightening I couldn't quite name. He stopped being affectionate. No more random forehead kisses, no morning coffee waiting for me. He said he was tired. Work was stressing him out. He needed space to decompress. I told myself it was just the post-wedding slump. Everyone goes through it. But space became silence, and silence became avoidance. He started staying later at work. When I texted, he'd reply hours later with short, flat messages. Busy. Can't talk now. I'll call you later. And later never came. I tried to plan a date night. He cancelled. I cooked his favorite dinner. He barely touched it. I asked if something was wrong, and he said, "You're being clingy lately. Can you just give me a little room to breathe?" I apologized. The intimacy died too, not just physically, emotionally. He used to ask about my day, listen to me vent, hold me while I cried over little things. Now he sat on the opposite side of the couch, scrolling endlessly through his phone. He'd go to bed before me, locking the door to the bathroom while he showered. I never even realized he'd started taking his phone in with him until I knocked once to ask him something, and he barked, "Give me a second." In this tone I'd never heard before. He used to be warm, now he was cold, like a stranger who wore my husband's face. I kept trying to fix it. I left notes in his lunch, bought him a book he'd once said he liked, tried to initiate conversation, connection, anything. Nothing worked. He'd say things like, "You always want something," or "Not everything has to be a conversation," or the worst, "Maybe we rushed into this." That one stung the most, because it echoed something I had once thought, briefly in passing, before we got married. But I'd brushed it off, because love was enough, right? I started crying in secret, not full sobs, just that tight throat, burning eyes kind of crying you hide in the shower. I told my mom I thought something was off. She said, "It's normal. Marriage is hard, give it time." I told myself the same thing, but deep down, something wasn't just off. It was unraveling, and then the nightmares started. Not literal dreams, but waking flashes. I'd be making coffee and suddenly wonder, what if he's cheating? What if there's someone else? I'd shake it off, tell myself I was being crazy, insecure, emotional, but the thought would always crawl back, like a splinter under my skin. The man I married had become someone I didn't recognize, and every time I looked into his eyes, I felt like he was hiding something behind them. Something big, something dangerous. It happened on a Tuesday, just an ordinary, boring, rainy Tuesday. I was folding laundry in the bedroom, trying not to think about how long it had been since we'd had a real conversation. He'd left early that morning, said he had a long day of meetings. He barely kissed my cheek goodbye. No smile, no warmth, just absence. I was sorting through a pile of his shirts when something slipped out of the pocket of one of his hoodies. A crumpled receipt. I picked it up without thinking, just instinct. But when I smoothed it out, my stomach twisted. It was from a local restaurant, a nice one, definitely not a lunch spot for co-workers. 2 dinners, 2 drinks, timestamp Sunday night. The same night, he told me he had to work late on a project and crashed at his co-workers to save time on his commute. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I told myself maybe it was old, maybe he went with a friend, maybe it meant nothing, but my hands were already shaking. Because I knew, deep down I knew, he had lied to me, again, and not about something small. I tried to calm myself, tried to think rationally. I wasn't going to accuse him, not without proof, not without something solid. So I started noticing things, writing them down in my notes app, just small details. The dinner receipt, a mystery key I found in his desk drawer, the fact that he always had his phone on airplane mode when he came home, a long hair I found on the passenger seat of his car, dark brown, not mine, the weekend business trip where he came back without his wedding ring, claiming it slipped off in the hotel shower. At first, I felt like I was losing my mind, but the more I saw, the more I couldn't unsee. I even started checking our shared bank account, small charges here and there that didn't add up, a gas station in a town 2 hours away, a hotel charge from a place he claimed he'd never stayed. When I asked him about it casually, he barely blinked. "Oh, that must have been a work thing. Someone probably used my card by mistake. He said it so calmly, like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I started testing him. I asked about that coworker he stayed with, what her name was. He paused just a second too long before saying Jessica. Funny. His calendar said Brett was the one who hosted that weekend. I mentioned the restaurant receipt. He said, "That must have been old. I've had that hoodie for months." But the hoodie still smelled like cologne. His newer cologne. The one I gave him 3 weeks ago. The lies were piling up like bricks, and I was suffocating under them. The final crack came the night he left his laptop open. He never did that, ever. He was in the shower. I wasn't even trying to snoop, but the screen was still on, and an email notification popped up. It was from a name I didn't recognize. Subject, same hotel this weekend? No greeting, no sign-off, just that one line. I didn't click it. I didn't need to. Because I already knew. I just didn't know who. But I was going to find out. I waited until he left for an early meeting. The second I heard his car pull away, I felt that awful mix of dread and adrenaline fizz through my veins. My hands were already sweating as I crept into his office. He always locked the bottom drawer of his desk. I'd never thought twice about it. Everyone has private stuff, right? But that morning, I noticed the key still dangling from the lock, almost like he'd forgotten, or maybe just gotten sloppy. I turned it. Inside was nothing dramatic. A couple of envelopes, a USB stick, some loose receipts. But one envelope was thick, heavy, stamped county clerk, certified copy. My pulse hammered. I told myself I'd just peek, get clarity, put it back. No damage done. I slid the papers out. It was a marriage certificate. His full name stared up at me in bold print. My stomach dropped before I even looked at the spouse line. Spouse. First name redacted. My maiden last name. Issue date, 18 months before we even met. For a split second, I honestly thought, there must be another woman out there with my exact last name. But when I saw the handwritten note in the margin, filed for status change, pending, I knew this wasn't ancient history. Someone had tried to alter the record recently. Someone was still maintaining it. My brain kept screaming, "Ask your sister! Ask your sister!" But another voice, cold, logical, whispered, "What if she already knows?" I snapped photos of every page, shoved everything back exactly how I found it, and locked the drawer. Then I grabbed the USB stick on a hunch and slid it into my pocket. If he noticed it missing, I'd deal with that fallout later. I needed answers now. I spent the rest of the morning pacing our kitchen, clutching my phone, staring at my sister's contact photo. I typed out a dozen messages and deleted everyone. Finally, I hit record on a voice memo. Something raw, something she couldn't ignore, but I couldn't make myself speak. My throat was too tight. By noon, I had one plan. Go to the courthouse myself, pull the public record, and see the other signature with my own eyes. If it was her, if it really was my sister, there'd be no room left for excuses. I grabbed my coat and the USB, stepped outside into the drizzle, and felt the world tilt a little sideways. Because just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. It's not what you think. No name, no context." Sent exactly 1 minute after I stepped out the door. I froze on the porch, rain soaking my hair, staring at the screen as a second text popped up. "We can explain. Just meet us tonight, 8 p.m. at the lake." Us. Not me, United States. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't just chasing a cheating husband. I was about to walk straight into a secret both of them were willing to fight to keep. I didn't go to the lake that night. I sat in my car outside the county clerk's office for 23 minutes, staring at the rain sliding down my windshield like the world itself was trying to melt away. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, my heart somewhere in my throat. I kept replaying the text in my mind. "We can explain. United States." There was nothing left to explain. I needed facts, proof, the kind no amount of lying could undo. I went inside, numb and cold, and asked for public marriage records under my husband's full name. The clerk didn't even blink, just typed it in, printed out a form, and handed it to me, like she wasn't handing me the sharpest knife I'd ever held. It was real, filed, certified, legal. He married my sister a year and a half before I even knew his name. Same man, same damn signature. There, in black ink, was my sister's full legal name, my maiden name, right beside his. The ceremony had taken place in another county, probably to keep it quiet. No photos attached, no addresses, just names, dates, and a devastating fact. There was no record of a divorce, no annulment, no separation notice, no legal end. I was his second wife, and I didn't even know I was in a triangle. I stumbled back to my car, locked the doors, and dug out the USB I had taken earlier. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop and opened the folder. At first it looked normal, work stuff, contracts, some PDFs. Then I saw a folder labeled Internal Archive. Inside were subfolders, dated, titled. One of them caught my eye immediately. K Wedding, 2021. My sister's first initial. I clicked it. Photos. Dozens of them. My sister, in a white dress. Him, in the same suit he wore to our wedding rehearsal. A beach. A small group of people I didn't recognize. Some I did, cousins, extended family, a few mutual friends. All of them standing there, clapping, smiling, watching them say vows. He married her, fully, publicly, intimately. And then 2 years later, he married me. I sat there, mouth open, staring at the screen while my lungs forgot how to breathe. My ears rang. I think I screamed, but I'm not even sure. My whole body went cold. In another folder, labeled Travel Confirmations, I found hotel reservations, flight bookings, dinner receipts. For 2 people. Trips he told me were business. Long weekends he claimed were solo retreats. All of them, every single one, matched with dates I now realized my sister had gone offline or too busy to talk. They were together, the whole time, while I was planning napkin colors and cake flavors and crying over how lucky I was. They were still married, still connected, still lying to my face. There was even a PDF of a notarized form for something called a spousal affidavit of support, signed by my sister. I Googled it. It's used for immigration cases, visa applications, green card petitions. My heart stopped. Was this marriage even about love? Or was I part of some deeper game? At that point, everything inside me just snapped. The fear, the confusion, the denial. It all crystallized into something sharper. Not rage, not yet, just clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. And I wasn't going to let them explain this away over some vague, creepy text. I had proof now, and I was going to confront them with everything. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I didn't cry. Not at first. It was worse than that. I just sat on the floor of our apartment, in the dark, staring at the screen of my laptop, at the photo of him, smiling in the sunlight, holding her hand, with her veil blowing gently in the wind. My sister, my own flesh and blood. He looked so happy. And worse, she looked in love. My body felt frozen, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Like maybe this wasn't real. Maybe I'd wake up and laugh about how vivid my dreams had become lately. But then I'd look back at the documents, the photos, the dates, the USB, and it would hit me all over again. This is happening. This happened to me. I started to spiral. What was I? A backup? A placeholder? A second round of paperwork in case the first wife got tired of playing along? I couldn't stop thinking about how carefully they must have coordinated it. Did they laugh about me behind my back? Did she sit across from me during family dinners, knowing the man I was kissing goodnight had already kissed her in front of a judge? I went back through old messages with her, trying to find anything, signs, clues, some kind of confession hidden between the lines. But all I found were more questions. Why didn't she say anything? Why didn't he? Why did everyone else just pretend? Was I so desperate to be loved that I didn't even notice when I became the side character in my own story? That's when the sobbing started, real heaving sobs that came out like they'd been bottled in my chest for months. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. My throat felt raw, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying every conversation, every look, every lie. Like the time my sister asked me if I was sure I wanted to get married so fast. Or the way he got nervous when I brought up doing a big family reunion with both sides. Or how my sister cancelled our final wedding dress fitting together, said she had a migraine. She didn't have a migraine. She probably couldn't stomach watching me marry her husband. And the worst part? A small broken piece of me still wanted to believe there had to be some logical explanation. That maybe it was a misunderstanding. That maybe someone had been forced, coerced, lied to. Because the alternative, that they both chose this, chose to lie, to hide, to stand next to me and smile while I walked straight into a trap. That was too much. Too cruel. And then came the shame. How could I not have seen it? How could I have let them into my heart, my home, my bed? I started deleting photos off my phone like it would help. Deleted our wedding video, our honeymoon selfies, the video he took of me dancing barefoot in our living room the night we got engaged. I deleted it all. And yet the grief stayed. I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. Because I didn't even know who I was anymore. I was the girl who married her sister's husband. And nobody stopped me. I didn't text him. I didn't warn him. I waited until he came home. He walked through the door like nothing was wrong. Dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. Took off his coat. Asked, "Hey babe, what's for dinner?" Like he hadn't set fire to my entire life. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the USB in my hand and the printout stacked in front of me. My heart was a grenade pin, just waiting to snap. He looked at the table, looked at me, froze. For a full 10 seconds, we just stared at each other. Then he said it. Not, "What's this?" Not, "Let me explain." Just, "How much do you know?" That sentence broke something in me, because it meant he wasn't going to deny it. He knew he'd been caught. He just wanted to measure the damage. I slid the marriage certificate across the table. "I know enough," I said quietly. "And if I don't, now would be a good time to fill in the blanks." He didn't even sit down. He just leaned against the counter, rubbing his face like I was inconveniencing him. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said. "No apology, no remorse, just that." I asked him straight, "Are you still married to my sister?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "We were going to get it annulled. It was never real." I stood up. My voice cracked. "You signed legal documents. You said vows. You married her before you met me." He nodded, slowly. Yeah, I did." And then added, "But it wasn't what you think." That phrase, "It's not what you think." It felt like a knife made of static, vague and slicing at the same time. He told me they got married as a favor, that she needed help with some immigration issue, that it was temporary, that they had an understanding. He swore there was no love, no intimacy, no relationship, just a legal arrangement he never planned on maintaining. I wanted to believe that so badly. I needed to believe it, but I'd seen the photos, the way they looked at each other, the handwritten note on the certificate, the hotel bookings, the emails. This wasn't just a paper marriage. This was a relationship. I asked him if it had continued while he was with me. He hesitated. He opened his mouth, closed it, finally said, "Not in the way you're thinking," which of course means yes. I asked if she knew he was marrying me. He went quiet. "Did she know?" I asked again, louder. He nodded, once. I felt my knees give out and grabbed the back of the chair to steady myself. "She knew," I whispered. "My sister knew." "She said it was fine," he said, and I'll never forget how calmly he said it. "She said it was over, that she wanted to move on. She even told me you'd be good for me." I laughed, actually laughed. A short, breathless, angry bark of a sound. "So you just married both of us? Like you were trading one model in for another?" He flinched at that, but didn't argue. I asked him what he planned to do, what the plan had been. He said, "I thought I could quietly finalize the annulment. No one had to know." "No one had to know," I repeated, stunned. "So your plan was to keep lying, even now?" He didn't deny it, just stared at the floor like a guilty teenager caught shoplifting. In that moment, I realized he wasn't sorry. He was sorry he got caught. He was sorry it had become inconvenient. But sorry for betraying me, for lying to two women who trusted him, number. And my sister, she'd known the whole time. I told him to get out. Not yell, not scream, just 4 words. "You need to leave." He tried to speak. I raised my hand and said it again. "You need to leave." And to my surprise, he did. No fight, no apology. Just walked out. I stood there in the kitchen alone, shaking, staring at the door like it might swing back open. But it didn't. And somehow, that silence hurt worse than any of his words. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just drove. I don't even remember putting on shoes or grabbing my keys. My hands moved before my brain did. All I knew was I needed to look her in the eyes. I needed to hear it from her. Not through some half-baked excuse, not filtered through his twisted logic. I wanted to watch her lie to my face. She lived in a studio apartment about 15 minutes away. I'd been there dozens of times. Birthday wine nights, sister movie marathons, the time I helped her move in after her last breakup, before she married the man I thought was mine. I banged on the door hard enough to make the wood echo. She opened it slowly, like she already knew who it would be. Like she'd been expecting this moment to come crashing down. Her eyes were red. No makeup. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. I didn't wait. "How long?" I asked. She just blinked. "How long?" Her voice cracked. "2 years before you met him." I stared at her. My heart felt like it had slipped down into my stomach. 2 years? And you never thought to mention that your husband was now dating your sister? She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't know at first. I swear I didn't. He told me he was seeing someone, but he didn't say it was you." I took a step forward. "But then you did know. You saw us together. You were at the dinner table, you saw him propose, and you still—" "What? Just watched it happen?" She backed up like I'd hit her. "I thought it was over. We were done. It was just paperwork. I didn't love him anymore." That made me laugh. "Paperwork?" I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened the wedding photos I found on his USB, and shoved them in front of her face. "You looked pretty in love to me here. Here. And here. Is that the face of someone faking it for immigration paperwork?" She turned away, covering her mouth with her hand. "I didn't think it would get this far," she said quietly. "I didn't think he'd actually marry you." The room spun. "So you were okay with me dating your husband?" "But marrying him was crossing the line," I snapped. "Jesus, Maria, you watched me fall in love with him. You helped me plan our wedding. You asked about the dress." She sobbed. I know. I was so ashamed, but I didn't know how to stop it. He said if I said anything, it would ruin everything." I froze. "He threatened you?" She hesitated. "Too long." "No," she admitted. "Not exactly. He just said he'd deny it, that I'd look crazy. And I believed him." I felt something dark settle inside me. Not rage, not betrayal. Something colder. Something like finality. "You could have told me," I said, barely above a whisper. "You could have warned me. One phone call, one message, one look, and you didn't." She reached for me and I took a step back. "I didn't want to lose you," she said. "You already did." We stood in silence for a moment, her crying, me shaking. Finally, I said the words I'd been holding back since the moment this all began. "You were my sister," I whispered. "You were supposed to protect me." She dropped her hand. "I'm sorry," she said, but it sounded like it was meant for herself. I turned and walked out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had a sister anymore. I didn't go home right away. I drove around aimlessly for hours. Windows rolled down even though the air was cold and wet. I didn't want to be anywhere that reminded me of them, either of them. I didn't want to sit on a couch where he'd kissed me. I didn't want to look at the mirror where I'd practiced saying my new last name. I didn't want to walk into the kitchen and remember how my sister helped me bake cupcakes for our engagement party while humming along to the same playlist she probably used for her wedding to him. I parked in a grocery store lot at one point. Just sat there in the dark, phone screen glowing in my lap, scrolling through old photos. I should have deleted them, but I couldn't, not yet. They felt like evidence, not of love, but of the lie, proof that I wasn't crazy. I had to keep reminding myself of that, because the voices in my head had started whispering again. "You should have seen it sooner. You were so easy to fool. You're the joke in someone else's story." I wanted to scream, cry, throw something, break every dish we picked out together at the wedding registry, but instead I just sat there, paralyzed. "Number," and the text started coming, from him. "Can we talk? You're overreacting. You don't understand the situation. Please stop telling people things that aren't true." That one broke something open in me, because now he was scared. Not sorry, scared. I ignored them, blocked him. Then I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. From her, my sister. "I know you hate me. I hate me too. I never meant to hurt you. Please don't tell Mom." Like that was her biggest fear. Not the betrayal, not the marriage, not the double life, But Mom finding out, I didn't reply to her either. I just sat there for a long time, wondering how I could go from being a bride to a victim, pawn, punchline, all in less than 2 weeks. People talk about heartbreak like it's loud, like it's screaming into pillows and burning photos and dramatic crying in the rain. But the real kind, it's silent. It's sitting completely still in a car for 3 hours because you don't know where you live anymore, even though you have keys in your hand. It's forgetting to blink. It's wondering if you'll ever trust another human being again. I finally drove back to the apartment, packed a single overnight bag, toothbrush, 2 shirts, my laptop, a pair of jeans. I couldn't bring myself to touch anything else. Not the framed wedding photo on the mantel. Not the his and hers mugs we thought were so cute. Not the ring sitting on the counter, gleaming like it meant something. I left it all. I went to a friend's house and barely made it through the front door before collapsing into her arms. I hadn't said a word yet, but she already knew. She just held me and whispered, "You're safe. You're not alone. You're not crazy." And that was the first time I cried without shame. Because for the first time since the wedding, someone told me the truth. I thought I knew the worst of it. I thought the damage had already been done, that there was nothing left to uncover except grief and healing. I was wrong. A few days after I left, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was vague. "Please read. I think we both deserve the truth." I almost deleted it, but something about it made my stomach flip. I opened it. Inside was a short message. "Hi, I'm sorry to reach out like this. I don't know you, but I believe we're both connected to Maria. I was engaged to him until 2 months ago. I just found out he married someone else. I think that someone is you." She attached screenshots, texts, emails, photos of them together. One of them kissing. One of them on a trip I remembered him telling me was a conference. The date stamp matched one of the hotel receipts I had found. She said they had been together for over 3 years, that she met him through work, that she'd helped him financially through a rough time, that he proposed to her 6 months before he proposed to me. 6 months. My blood ran cold. She said he started pulling away late last year, that he got busy, that he became distant, and then one night, she found an email confirming a wedding venue booking in my name. That's how she found out. The same way I found out about her, accidentally, by catching the lie, not being told the truth. He hadn't just been married to my sister while courting me. He had been engaged to a third woman, a woman who thought she was the only one, who thought he was the victim of a toxic ex, my sister. Apparently, he told her my sister was an obsessed ex who used to stalk him, that I was just a friend helping him heal. I felt sick. He was spinning entire narratives depending on the woman he was with. 3 of us, all played at the same time, all believing we were the one, all thinking he was kind, gentle, damaged but loving. But the manipulation didn't stop there. She said she found notes in his phone, scripts, actual scripts, what to say if confronted, what lies he'd told each of us, how to redirect, which stories belonged to which woman. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't even just betrayal. It was orchestration, strategy. He kept a goddamn playbook. And then she wrote one last thing, something that punched the air right out of my lungs. He mentioned your sister once, called her the insurance policy. I didn't understand what that meant at the time. I think I do now. The insurance policy. My sister wasn't just some tragic first wife. She wasn't even just complicit. She was his backup plan, his paper safety net, the person he could use to stay in the country, the one who wouldn't question things if he got busy, because she loved him, or because she thought she owed him, or maybe because she was afraid of him. Suddenly, things clicked into place, the way she flinched when I confronted her, the hesitation before answering, the shame. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear. And now I was starting to feel it too, because someone who can juggle 3 lives, 3 women, and never slip, that's not just a cheater, that's a sociopath. I didn't get out of bed for 2 days. I didn't shower. I didn't eat. I didn't answer texts. My friend left food outside my door and knocked gently, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not because I didn't want to see her, but because I didn't want her to see me. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left behind the shell of a woman who used to believe in good things. I used to be bright, software hopeful. I used to believe in soulmates, in family, in home. Now, every memory felt poisoned. I didn't just lose a husband. I lost my sister. I lost my trust in people. I lost myself. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the triple life or the lies, or the humiliation of being a punchline in a story I didn't know I was in. It was the feeling that everyone around me had been in on it. My parents so enamored with him. My sister, silent and watchful. My friends who told me something felt off, but didn't push. Even I had played a part. I had been so desperate to hold on to something good that I ignored every gut feeling, every strange moment, every piece of evidence screaming in my face. And now I didn't trust myself at all. I second-guessed every thought. Was that memory real, or was it just what he wanted me to believe? Did my sister really hesitate back then, or did I imagine that? Had I always been this easy to manipulate? I kept replaying it over and over. Our engagement night, the wedding, our honeymoon. I remembered how he held my hand on the plane and whispered, "I've never felt this sure about anything in my life." And I wanted to scream, because he probably said the same thing to the other woman, to my sister, to whoever else hadn't come forward yet. What if there were more? That thought rooted deep and wouldn't let go. What if there were others? Other women, other lies, other lives he lived when he said he was working late or traveling for business. I thought about warning them, posting his name online, telling the world. But I couldn't even pick up my phone without shaking. The shame was too big, too raw, too consuming. Who was I now? I was the girl who married a fraud, the woman who shared a bed with someone who saw her as a prop, the sister who was too blind to see what was right in front of her. I felt like a fool. Worse, I felt complicit, because I let it happen. I let him walk into my life and rewrite it, page by page, until the story no longer belonged to me. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, older, colder, and underneath it all, deeply, desperately alone. I don't know what exactly pulled me out of it. Maybe it was the third untouched plate of food on my nightstand. Maybe it was the angry, swollen ache in my eyes that wouldn't go away. Maybe it was just the numbness becoming too heavy to carry. But one morning I woke up, not because I felt better, but because I couldn't feel worse. And somewhere, in that thick fog of misery, a different part of me started to rise. The part that was done being a victim. The part that wanted answers, consequences, closure. I sat down at my friend's kitchen table with the USB, the courthouse records, the screenshots from the other woman's email, the printed marriage certificates, all of it. I laid them out like evidence in a courtroom. Because this wasn't just heartbreak. This was fraud. This was emotional abuse. This was criminal. I called a lawyer first. I found one who specialized in family law and explained everything. She didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said one sentence that changed everything. "You have more power than you think." She walked me through the process, how bigamy laws worked in our state, how the second marriage, my marriage, was likely invalid from a legal standpoint, how pressing charges could be an option if I chose to go that route. She said words I needed to hear. "You are not crazy, you are not dramatic, you are not to blame." Next, I filed a police report. It felt terrifying walking into that station. I kept looking over my shoulder, as if he'd appear and smile and make me question everything again. But he didn't. He wasn't there. And I told the officer the truth. I handed over the proof. They took it seriously. The next step was harder. I had to call my parents. I wasn't going to protect anyone's peace anymore. I wasn't going to carry their shame for them. I told them the whole story. Every awful, humiliating, unbelievable detail. My mom sobbed. My dad went silent. But the worst part? They both asked the same thing. "Did your sister know?" And when I told them yes, the silence that followed said more than any scream could. I didn't ask them to take sides. I didn't want revenge through them. I just needed them to know. I needed to stop being the only one carrying this weight. After that, I reached out to the other woman, the one who emailed me. We met for coffee. No cameras, no drama. Just two strangers who had been lied to by the same man. And she was kind. Heartbroken, but kind. She shared more receipts, more timelines. And together we mapped it all out: his movements, his lies, the overlapping dates, the inconsistencies. What we uncovered was sickening. He hadn't just juggled us, he'd manipulated us into isolating from one another, told each of us stories about the others, planting seeds of distrust to make sure we never compared notes. It almost worked. But now we were done playing the roles he wrote for us. I started documenting everything. Dates, memories, every weird moment that made more sense now. I made a digital timeline, printed backups, stored copies in the cloud. I wasn't just building a case, I was building a shield against the gaslighting, against the guilt, against the version of myself that once stayed quiet to keep the peace. I wasn't quiet anymore, and I was just getting started. I didn't want revenge, not the kind you see in movies anyway. No grand explosions, no shouting matches, no public meltdowns. I wanted something quieter, smarter, permanent. I wanted truth, and I wanted it to follow him, like a shadow he couldn't shake. The first thing I did was send an anonymous package to his job. No threats, no accusations, just facts. Inside, copies of both marriage certificates, screenshots from his inbox, a printed timeline of overlapping relationships, a simple cover page. Ask him which wife is coming to the next company retreat. 2 days later, I heard through a friend that he'd been placed on administrative leave. The company's HR department opened a formal investigation. He wasn't just a cheater, he was in a management role, and they had a morality clause in their executive contract. The fallout started slow, but then picked up speed. Next, I contacted immigration services. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to destroy someone's life just for the sake of it. But then I remembered the affidavit I found. My sister's signature. The quiet way she'd said, "I didn't think it would go this far." The fact that this whole mess started with their fake marriage. So I reported it. Every document, every email, every hotel receipt that proved they were still together long after the paperwork should have been annulled. I told the truth, nothing more, nothing less. I wasn't trying to get anyone deported. I just wanted the fraud exposed. If he used her to stay in the country, he needed to answer for it. If she helped him, willingly, she needed to answer for that too. And then, I turned inward. I filed to annul our marriage on the grounds of bigamy and fraud. My lawyer helped draft the language. She said, "You're going to win this. There's no way a judge sees this and lets him walk clean." I also reported him to the state. Bigamy is a crime. And while prosecution isn't always guaranteed, the paper trail was undeniable. Even if nothing came from it legally, I wanted his name on record. Something that would pop up in a background check. Something that would follow him into the next job, the next town, the next woman. Because I wasn't going to stay quiet and let him do this again. But maybe the most satisfying part, I reached out to every woman I found in his contacts. Anyone who looked even remotely like they might have been part of the puzzle. Not with accusations, with questions. "Hi, I know this is strange, but I'm reaching out because I think we were both involved with the same man. If you'd be willing to talk, I can explain. I have proof." Some ignored me, a few blocked me, but 3 responded, and 2 of them had also dated him in the past year. One even thought she was his fiancée. Another had recently broken things off because he was getting too weird about hiding his phone. I told them everything. We cried, we laughed bitterly. We shared photos and timelines and filled in gaps we didn't know we had. And in the end, we made a private group chat. We called it His Wives Club. It sounds stupid, but it gave us power. It reminded me I wasn't alone, that I wasn't stupid, that I was one of many. And we decided together that we weren't going to let him keep doing this. One of the women was a journalist. She pitched our story to a local outlet, anonymized at first, just a multi-wife bigamy scandal with court documents and testimony. It went viral. People connected the dots. Eventually, names were leaked. His, my sister's, mine. I thought I'd be humiliated, but instead, I felt seen, heard, believed, and that was worth everything. It didn't all come crashing down at once. It unraveled, slowly, steadily, publicly, and he couldn't stop it. The article got picked up by a national outlet within a week. They didn't use my real name at first, just A woman who unknowingly married a man already legally wed to her sister. But it didn't take long for the internet to do what it always does. Screenshots surfaced, old wedding photos from mutual friends' accounts. My sister's Facebook still had their beach wedding banner photo up. The one I'd seen in the USB folder. His LinkedIn was flooded with comments. "This you? 3 women at once, you need therapy and a courtroom. Tell me you're not the guy from the article." He deleted his social media, but it was too late. The company released a public statement. "Name is no longer employed with us, effective immediately." Turns out, they didn't just fire him for violating their ethics policy. They also uncovered discrepancies in his resume and credentials. Half the things he told me about his past were lies. The other women in our wives' club began speaking out too. One of them had dated him off and on for over 4 years. He told her he wanted to marry her. She had already been suspicious. His disappearing acts, the late-night calls he wouldn't explain. She said she always felt like she was being rotated in. She just hadn't realized how many other women were in the cycle. Then the legal side hit. The state pressed charges: bigamy, fraud, and falsification of public records. It wasn't a long prison sentence. He didn't go to jail for years or anything. But he was arrested. Mugshot posted. His face smeared across news stations for the local scandal of the year. When I saw his photo, I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. Like I was looking at a stranger. As for my sister, she left town. She didn't reach out again. Not after the immigration report was filed. Not after the article came out. Not after her name started showing up in forums and gossip posts. Somewhere in the middle of the fallout, she deactivated everything. My parents were devastated. They tried to hold the family together at first, talked about healing, about giving grace. But I told them, I don't need grace, I need space. And they gave it to me. They apologized, over and over. But even that didn't undo the ache of knowing they smiled in photos at both weddings, not knowing they were being used too. The annulment went through. Clean, swift, final. The paperwork arrived in the mail in a slim white envelope. I held it in my hands for 5 full minutes before opening it. And when I did, I cried, not because I was sad, because I was free. There's no romantic ending here. No new love waiting in the wings. No perfect resolution. But there is peace. There's the quiet comfort of waking up and knowing that no one is lying next to me. That no one is twisting my life behind my back. That the worst part is over. He lost everything. His career, his reputation, his women. And I gained something he never had. A life built on truth. It's strange. The things you remember once the dust settles. I don't think about the betrayals as much anymore. Not the hotel receipts. Not the overlapping dates. Not even the wedding photos that still haunt some dusty corner of the internet. What I remember most is silence. The silence of the apartment after he left. The silence on the phone after I told my parents. The silence between my sister and me, stretching longer and colder with each passing day. But now, that silence feels different. It's not hollow anymore. It's clean, like the ringing in your ears after a storm. Unsettling at first, but somehow peaceful when you realize the worst has already passed. I still catch myself flinching at certain phrases. When someone says, "He's such a good guy," I tense. When I hear the word soulmate, I bite my tongue. But I've learned not to shame myself for that. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days I feel like I'm sprinting forward. Other days, I trip over memories and land face first in disbelief again. But I get back up. That's what matters. There was a time I would have begged for an apology. From him, from her, from the universe. But I don't need one anymore. Because the truth? Closure doesn't come from them. It comes when you decide it's over. And it is. Over. Done. Filed, signed, sealed, buried. The woman who got married thinking she'd found her forever. She doesn't exist anymore. And that's okay. She was kind. She was trusting. She loved hard. Too hard, maybe. But the woman who stands in her place now, she's still kind, just not naive. She still loves, but not blindly. And she doesn't apologize for expecting honesty, clarity, respect. I no longer define myself by what was taken from me. I define myself by what I survived. 'Cause I did survive. The lies, the shame, the unraveling, the isolation. I faced every ugly truth and came out the other side with open eyes and a stronger spine. Some scars will stay with me. I won't pretend otherwise. but I wear them like armor now. Not shame. I changed my name back. It was one of the last things I did, but it mattered more than I expected. Not because I hated his name. Honestly, it sounded fine. But because it didn't belong to me. It was a mask I wore for a version of myself that didn't survive. That name carried too much. Too many lies. Too many nights I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if love had ever really touched me, or if I'd just been dancing alone the whole time. The day I stood in that government office, handing over my paperwork, the clerk smiled and said, "Starting fresh, huh?" I nodded, but what I wanted to say was, I'm not starting over. I'm finally claiming what was always mine. I moved out of the apartment we shared, not in a dramatic, torch-it-all way, just quiet boxes, a new lease, a simpler space, my own, no more half-empty drawers, no more wine glasses chosen for a wedding that was never real. And every morning now, I wake up to something that doesn't seem remarkable, but is. Peace, not perfection, not a fairy tale, just peace. I sit with my coffee and water my plants, and scroll my phone without wondering who's lying to me or who's about to tear the floor out from under my feet. Sometimes I still get emails from women, strangers, people who read the article or heard the story through someone else. They say things like, "I thought I was the only one. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Your story helped me walk away." And I never know what to say back except the only truth I have. I believe you. You're not alone. You're not stupid. You're not broken. Because I believed all those things once, and I was wrong. There's a quiet power in surviving something you thought would break you. There's peace in knowing the worst has come and gone, and you're still here. I used to think closure was something someone else gave you. A letter, an apology, a final conversation. But now I know it's a choice, and I choose it. I choose to forgive myself, to let go of the questions that no longer deserve answers, to walk forward not with bitterness but with boundaries. Not with vengeance, but with clarity. I don't need them to admit what they did. I don't need them to explain why. Because I already know who they are. And more importantly, I finally know who I am. And that's enough.